Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So today is webinar number 12, and Happy New Year to all of our principals and everyone watching right now. We're going to get started here in a second. Today it's just me. Normally it's myself and Tanya, which most of you have seen before or reached out to, but today's just going to be me, and we're going to speak on the value of influencers. We're going to talk a little bit about influencers, and then go into a little bit more specifics and how you can use influencers, as well as how to determine legitimate influencers. Because that topic, influencer marketing, has grown so much in the last few years. Now it's to a point of ensuring that the influencers that you hire are going to basically produce the content or do what they're intended to do, which is to tap into a really niche audience for you and provide your message to their audience, which is the audience you're trying to reach. So we're going to get started right here in a second. I'm going to pull up our presentation and then we can get started. Just give me a few minutes to get this set up. You'll see my screen for a second, and then you'll see the presentation. Okay, here we go. So we're going to get started speaking on the value of influencer marketing today. So let's get started by talking a little bit about what influencer marketing is. But before we dive into that, as you know, I say this before every presentation, but if you'd like to leave comments or questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to do so. We really encourage questions because I feel like oftentimes there are questions that many principals or if you're on the marketing team for the school that you'd like to ask, but you might just not have the courage to do so, or you're not sure if that's a valid question. We accept all questions. We want you to ask questions. That way we can kind of dive deeper into different conversations. So if you have a question, feel free to comment it in the chat box to the right, and then we will answer, or I will answer today since it's just me. I will answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. And if you are not comfortable having your question or comment visible to everyone else, you can always send me an email after, and I'll have it on the screen at the end of the presentation, but it's victoriap@samuelsochoa, and you can send me a question personally that I can send you a response or even give you a call back to discuss it further. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about first, what is influencer marketing? So basically, influencer marketing capitalizes on the relationship between an influencer and a specific brand. So we all know certain personalities. They might even be known as celebrities now, but they're individuals who basically have a really large presence on social media, and they also have a really heavy number of followers. And these followers normally are very dedicated followers. They trust this person. They consider them almost like a friend, and they have this relationship with this influencer because they follow them daily. So whether they're just on social media, which is Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or maybe they have a blog, or they even might have a vlog where that is present on YouTube, regardless, they connect with this person every single day, majority of the time, and they see parts of their life every single day. So it's almost as if you have a friend, but is a virtual friend, someone that you only see online, and you don't really get to see in person, but you still have that conversation or that connection with them. And a good influencer, which most who have succeeded and have achieved that celebrity-like status, will connect with you on a personal level. So you can leave comments or questions on their videos, and they will respond right back to you. And so you kind of have that relationship strengthened even more through that. So that's basically what an influencer is. So if you can kind of picture somebody that you might follow on social media, that you might be subscribed to them on YouTube, that you watch every single day, that is exactly what an influencer is. But it's also important not to confuse these celebrity endorsements. So there are celebrities out there who do come out on commercials, speaking for a brand, etc. Not exactly the same, somewhat similar, but not exactly the same. These influencers are there on a more personal level because they have that opportunity to connect with their fans through messaging. And so they're two definitely separate types of marketing. So let's go now. I'm going to give you just a little example on what influencer content is. So for example, Mary Orton, she's visible on Instagram, Facebook. She has a blog. And so as you can see, she is a fashion influencer. So this post talks about her holiday outfit. And as you can see, she tags Banana Republic. So if you don't know, Banana Republic is a woman's fashion line. And she tags them in their post, showcasing to her audience that this is a brand that she likes, that she's comfortable with, that she will wear. And so even just by the comments, you can see, fans and followers will comment on there. And more than likely, even the exact outfit that she's wearing, they're going to go and try and find it at Banana Republic because they trust Mary so much, because they trust her style and her content. They know that she's speaking truthfully, that this is something that she would wear. And so she's built this following with her. And so that deems her as an influencer. And so this is just one example. I have another one that is influencer content. This is Unbox Therapy. So this is actually somebody that I follow on YouTube. He is a vlogger, tech influencer, and his name is very appropriate for what he does. So he's Unbox Therapy. He has buys different tech products that are on the market that, come out. He's normally one of the first ones to get his hands on them. And then he unboxes it on his video, on his profile, showcases it to his audience, and then tests out the product for his audience to see. That way, majority of the people who are techies, who like tech, like material or products, will go and watch his channel before they buy the product and see what he thought about it. They want to get his opinion because he's an influencer in this area in tech. And so they trust him. And so they know, let's see, this segue that he is shooting a video on, if this segue works out, if it's something that he approves and says, yes, this was great, I loved it, I would definitely use it further or more in the future, then they are much more likely to go out and buy it themselves. And he knows that. And sometimes content can be sponsored. So maybe this brand right here called Ninebot, they might have sent him this segue and said, hey, we'll pay you, so much to speak on this product. And some influencers do that. They will accept funds to speak on a certain product. But most influencers usually try to remain as unbiased as possible because that's something that they want to maintain that trust between their audience. They don't want their audience to say, well, they might not actually use this product. They might just be saying that because they got paid to do so, This is a influencer that I definitely do trust because he is very truthful in his answers. I've seen him review specific tech products that were sent to him. He wasn't paid to say anything about it. They were just sent to him for free. But he did use the product and review it and say, no, this is not something that I would use. So he is truthful because he wants to establish that relationship with his audience and continue to have that trust with them. So we'll refer back a little bit more to Unbox Therapy as we go on through the presentation and we talk about ensuring that the influencer that you choose has that trust with their audience. So how do influencers work exactly? So for example, an influencer such as a fitness vlogger that you might watch maybe on YouTube, maybe they're really knowledgeable in weight training and they're somebody that you watch every day to get your workout in or to get inspiration on how you should work out. They might be asked to do a post regarding maybe their sportswear, his or her sportswear. And so let's just say, for example, we'll use a generic brand. Nike reaches out to them and says, hey, we'll pay you to speak on this new pair of shorts that we're launching that help you be more efficient when you run. And so they send him or her the product, and they promote that product on all their social media channels. They do a post about it. And so it works basically just like that. Majority of the time, it works as though Nike will send them, say they send them a pair of shorts. The influencer does have the independence to operate and post about the product how they would like to. So they have the freedom to create all of their own content as long as it sticks to the specific set of rules or specifications that Nike might have. Say, they say, here are the shorts. We want you to produce content about these shorts, but you have to be wearing them. We want them to show like how they fit, etc. That might be a specification. But the influencer has the opportunity to frame, how the content looks or how the photo looks themselves. So it's not Nike going out on their own dime and going and taking this photo of the influencer. The influencer takes the photo themselves, so they get to have that creativity to produce their own content. And so influencer categories are numerous. I mean, there's foodie influencers, beauticians, artists or models, etc. Influencers just now are vast among different categories. So they're kind of all over the place. And most have a really good following. And it's really just dependent upon who follows them, etc. So let's move on to influencer content. So like I said, influencers are completely in control of their own content, and they're completely in control of the brand's message. So they have the ability to choose how they want to portray the item or the product to remain in touch with their audience, which is why them remaining independent is so important to establish that trust between them and their audience, because their audience already kind of has a feel of what their content is going to look like. And if it's something that they generally didn't produce themselves, that maybe Nike had constructed themselves and sent over, it's really not going to fit the influencer's brand. It's really going to stick out to the audience, and they're going to say, this is something obviously that our influencer did not create. It was something that they were told to post and paid for. So now their audience is definitely a lot less likely to trust them. And so that's why it's so important for influencers to have that independence, because it helps them remain in touch with their audience, and it contributes to the authenticity of their account. So moving on to monetary value. So this is just something that that is not spot on, because monetary value differs from each platform to platform, from Instagram to Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. Every platform is different, but this is just an example. It can be assumed that there's a price point of $1,000 for every 100,000 followers, but that can be adjusted depending on reach for the influencer, and depending on that specific post. So it really does differ across all platforms, and of course it also differs for the amount of followers that that influencer has. If they have a larger audience, if they have a bigger following, then of course their monetary value is going to go up because their audience is so much bigger. And usually those bigger name influencers are the ones that really bigger accounts or companies use, because they have the opportunity to tap into those niche audiences. And so they definitely do get paid a lot more as compared to influencers who don't have such as big of a following. So now let's move on to why influencer marketing is so important. We know that it's a very new type of marketing, but we also have to think about the way technology has shifted recently, or not recently, but in past years, how technology has shifted from television being the only platform that mass media consumers had access to. So back then, of course, it was only TV. There was no, social media, before internet began. Television was the only way for the consumer to see various products, to be able to decide themselves that, that was something that they wanted to buy. And so today, now they have so many other platforms that they can engage with content on, that they can see other products being used. There's so many other platforms for them to do so. And so while this is amazing for the consumer, as us, because we all are consumers, it's great for us because now we might say, oh, we want this product. Now we have the ability to go out and search and see which one is the right one for us. But it can also be really overwhelming for us because there's so many different types of those products and so many different reviews. And oftentimes we get really overwhelmed and we're not sure which one to choose. And so that's where the influencer comes into play. Because if you have somebody, think about it as it being a family member. Say you go to your cousin and say, this is what I want, a specific vacuum cleaner. And you've searched and now you have all these different ones to choose from. You're not entirely sure, but your cousin says, yeah, that's great and all that you did all that research, but I have one that you're referring to, one that is exactly everything that you need, but I used it, I've tried it, I loved it, it's lasted me this long, and I would definitely buy another one. If they were to give you that type of advice, then it, of course, would be something that you would say, oh, okay, then yeah, I trust that then I'm going to go out and buy the exact same vacuum cleaner because I trust the person who gave me a review, rather than reading all of those reviews online and just not being sure about it. And so that's basically what an influencer is. Here's somebody that you trust, that you've built a relationship with because you may not speak to them directly every day, but they speak to you, through their content. So that's how that trust is created. And so that is why influencer marketing now is so important, because even for Catholic schools, there's so many schools to choose from in San Antonio. But if you have somebody that is an advocate for you, somebody that they trust, I can say, this is definitely a school that I would send my child to. They had this experience and it was amazing. They graduated and they, went out to do all these different things, and they have this large amount of followers. Those followers are more likely to say, if they're a mother, then yeah, that's somewhere where I want to send my child to school to. And so it's really important nowadays because there's so many different outlets for the consumer to explore. But at the same time, while it's great for the consumer, it can be a really big problem for brands also. Each brand's target audience spreads now across various platforms rather than them just, targeting TV ads, knowing that their audience is going to see it. Now they have to create content that will spread across all these different platforms. And so it really, really makes it hard for them to reach their audience because there's so many different platforms. And so that is kind of the short and sweet about why influencer marketing is just so important in today's era. So we're going to move on to what is the result of this. So now that marketers have realized this shift, so, they kind of sat down and said, okay, now there's so many more platforms for us to explore to reach our audience, and our audience is now spread out across all these different platforms. So what do we do now? So they tapped into influencer marketing to advertise directly. Even though their audience is spread out, they can kind of narrow that audience to a specific influencer and spread their message through the influencer. And so thus is how influencer marketing began. However, for consumers, this started to become an issue only because they started to become really skeptical of brands and how they started working with influencers. They started to realize the content that their favorite influencer is producing might look a little bit different, or they might say, well, this isn't a product I've ever seen them use before. Why are they starting to use this product, and why are they such a big advocate for it? And so it can cause a problem with influencers who are now promoting certain products, but they are not transparent with their audience in saying that this was something that they were paid to promote. So it breaks that trust, really. And so really now today, in today's era, it really is so important for influencers to maintain the trust with their audience and to ensure that they come across and are authentic with their audience, because then they could lose that audience and then their reach definitely drops, and they can no longer be an influencer because now their audience doesn't trust them. And of course, now with today's social media, it's so easy for someone to write about or tweet about saying that, oh, now I don't trust this influencer because I know that they're just being paid to talk about products. And so that spreads to their audience and it just goes on like wildfire. So it's definitely so important now for influencers to really ensure that that trust is maintained. And so if an influencer can successfully build that and promote products that they love, then they know that their audience is definitely going to follow them because they have that trust established between them. So today more than ever, and something that we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, to how to ensure that that audience does have that trust built, or that influencer does have that trust built with their audience. There are specific ways to kind of do research and see that that they are valid. So this is a quote by Dovetail owner Mike Schmidt. He talked a little bit about what an influencer is, because it is such a recent term. Not many people know what an influencer is, and so he explained it, I thought, in a really easy, able to understand way. Influencers are people. People are maybe personas, because each influencer has an actual persona associated with them, but it is a person with a brand and an audience. What makes them attractive to advertisers is their ability to speak to a very defined group of fans. The way the ecosystem is maturing looks a lot like the internet in the early days. So think of it this way. The internet back then was very direct with those who got on the internet, right? It had a very specific way to speak to those who wanted to browse the internet, and that's compared to now how advertisers or influencers are seen. So it's not just something, you can't just wake up one day and say, I mean, you can, but you have to be very careful with how you do it. You know, you say you wake up one day and say, I want to be an influencer. Well, one, it comes with creating content. Two, it comes with establishing the voice and a particular message that you want to have with your audience. And you have to speak to your audience in that voice every time you post, every time you create content. You have to be able to speak to your audience in a specific way that they take a liking to, because that's the whole reason why they followed you to begin with. They love the way they loved your creativity. They love everything that you're talking about. And so if you're able to speak to a very defined group of people the same way every day, while it may look different, but you still grab their attention in the way that they like every single day, that's what a successful influencer is. And that is what is so attractive to advertisers, because they know that you really have essentially a really good handle on your audience, that you know anything that you promote or talk about or advocate for, they are definitely going to get behind it and do the same. So that's just a really good quote if you ever want to go back and kind of remind yourself about what an influencer is. So now we're going to talk about ensuring compatibility. So let's say you're at the point where you've decided, yes, I do want to hire an influencer, or I do want to partner with an influencer now to promote our school or to do events with our school, etc. There are a few different tips that you can follow to help you pick the influencer that is best for you. And that is going to do the job that you actually intend for them to do. So be aware of their audience is the first tip. So the whole reason why you work with an influencer to begin with is to speak to their audience. You want that message to come across to them. And so once you find an influencer who, one, has the same values as you, because you don't want to employ an influencer or have someone speak on your behalf who isn't really somebody that you agree with their views. They might back a specific organization or a specific person that maybe your school or the parents of your school are not comfortable with. And so you'd really have to do your research and see, one, who their audience is, but see what their values are. So you have to do this by just digging really deep, spending time looking at your influencers' profiles, even scrolling through and seeing what their followers look like. What are their followers spend time doing, and see what other content that the influencer is posting or that the audience is posting themselves. You can also ask the influencer for data on the location and even the age of their audience as well to make sure that that's the good fit for you. All of us should have demographics for our audiences. See, male, female, age range, everything like that should be laid out. You should have a really good demographic for your audience and see if that audience is something that you're looking for with your influencer. Next is knowing their stance. So like we talked about, being comfortable and positive that you do want to work with them based off of their values and their views. So really do research and see what they stand for. Go back, years, even if you have to, and see what did they advocate for last year and the year before that. See if that's something that you would advocate for yourself. The last thing you really want to do is just pick an influencer because they're popular, just because they have a really large following. That's the absolute last thing that you want to do, because it's going to come across very staged, very fake, essentially, to the audience. And you don't want that, because that's when the trust gets broken, not only for you, but for the influencer. And so you really have to do your research and see what is their stance on certain topics. See if that aligns with your values. Not only just do thorough research for what they stand for, but for what they do stand for, see how they're demonstrating it. See if you're comfortable with that. See if maybe they're very outspoken, which is good, but they do it in a way that you're not comfortable with. You have to do your research to see if that's something that you want to be associated with, and see basically if they're the real deal, if it's something that you're comfortable with. Next, you're going to want to see if they are effective with their content. So that basically means that you, one, believe in their content, that you know that that's something that's going to work for you, but that it's really compatible with your brand itself, and that their message is going to resonate, that it's going to impact the audience, because a lot of the times they are going to be the one to write the message themselves. You might tell them, hey, advocate for a particular school, but they get to write the message themselves on how they want to advocate for the school to their audience. So go through and read through their content, see how they tailor it, how is it stylized, what is their, even down to their grammar, see if their grammar is great. If that's something that you want to best reflect your school, you have to do all that research to be sure that this is something that you, or someone that you want to advocate for your school. Next is, will your audience resonate them? So of course, like I said, do your research, ensure that you have your audience demographic laid out, and that it's really concise, and then compare that with their audience and see if that's something that's going to be a really good fit. If it's not going to be a good fit, don't force it. Don't try to, like I said, pick the influencer just because they have a big following. You really don't want to do that. So of course, see what they're talking about and why, and see what influences the audience's behavior, what influences your audience's behavior, and ensure that those two are aligned as well. Ask yourself, is my audience going to resonate with them to even begin with? And next, you're going to want to do your research. Of course, like I said this whole time, you must do your research. Ask yourself the questions, what is going to go right? What do you hope to go right? Or what can go completely wrong? To be sure that you have all of your bases covered and that you are not surprised. Next, you're going to want to align, like I said, with your company's values. Go through your values. Even sometimes we might forget, like, what is something that our school or our company or our brand really advocates for? What is the main message? And then compare that to their values and see if they align. Don't partner with somebody who obviously speaks badly maybe about Catholic schools, or, just so that way, if I pay them, they'll still speak about it. You don't want that, because then it's very contradictory. It's going to look that way. And so you really got to do your research and see if their values line up with yours. So once you've done your research, you decide, this is somebody that is going to be great to work with. Our values align. The audience looks extremely compatible. I love the way they style their content. I have faith that they're going to do a great job. Then you have to build that relationship. It's not something that you can just email an influencer or call up an influencer and say, here's some money, you have to talk about this. You have to build that relationship with them first. And so you have to practice building that authentic relationship before aligning publicly. So get to know them, maybe at conferences or networking groups, or even reach out to them directly, see if you can do a video chat or a phone call. Just be sure to start establishing that relationship. That way, when you do ask for that type of exchange, for them to speak on your school on your behalf, that it's a little bit easier and it doesn't just come across as you reaching out to them simply because they are an influencer. Also, this is just another tip, try to pick an influencer who has already mentioned you before in their social media posts. So say an influencer who's a big advocate of Catholic schools, try to pick that type of influencer because you already know that this is something that they're open to, rather than somebody who you have no idea what they might, how they might view Catholic schools or your brand. Just a little bit easier if you have an influencer who has mentioned you before. Nextly, monitor their engagement and post interaction. This, I think, is the most important to me, because later on in a few slides, or the next slide, I believe, we're going to talk about fake influencers. That is an actual thing. And so you really have to not only do your research, see what their values are, see what they stand for, see how they create their content, but monitor their engagement and post interaction. See if they really care about their audience, if they maintain their audience, if they maintain that relationship with them. Do all of that just by monitoring their engagement and post interaction. If they reach out to their audience daily, answer those comments as quickly as they can, then you'll know that this is an influencer who really does take their role, their job, because essentially now this is a job for them. They take it very seriously, and it's not just something that they just do it just to do it. They actually care about the audience that they're speaking to, because a lot of influencers are aware of the connection they have with their audience. They're aware that anything they speak positively of is most likely going to get picked up by their audience. And so hire someone or work with an influencer who cares about their audience. And so dig deep into an influencer's personal history. Dig deep into what they did before they were an influencer, how they rose to fame, basically. You have to dig deep and make sure that everything that they've advocated for, that they speak on, you're comfortable with now. And then lastly, hire an expert, not somebody who's going to investigate for you, although you could. Hire the influencer that you know is an expert, not someone who consistently gets paid or consistently gets told to by different brands to speak on their product just because they know they're going to get mass amounts of followers from it, but somebody who is an actual expert on that, in that field or on that topic. So for example, like we talked about the vlogger couple slides back, Unbox Therapy. He is considered an expert in the tech industry, in the tech product industry specifically, because of his experience, because of working with all these different tech products, knowing which ones are best, doing his research on other companies to know which companies are the best. He is an expert in that field. Also, it's just time because he's done it for so long. He's worked with so many different products. He's reviewed so many different products. So he has the knowledge to compare products against each other. And so that is why his audience trusts him so much, because he's an expert. He is somebody that his audience can go to and say, is this something that you would buy? Do you recommend it? And he can say yes or no because he's an expert in his field. I mean, that is exactly what you want. You want somebody who's an expert in their field, not somebody who doesn't have any knowledge on what you want them to speak about. Make sure you do your research to ensure that. And so, like I said, we're going to talk about now how to avoid fake influencers. So after influencers rose to the fame that they are now, it became more relevant or more evident, to audiences that there was a recent wave of influencers who had really large amounts of followers, but didn't necessarily have the engagement that they should have had due to those large amounts of followers. So in doing all that research, a lot of brands came to determine that the influencers have used, certain influencers, I won't name any, mainly because I can't think of any right now, but they have used sites that actually buy followers to make themselves seem more appealing to potential clients or potential brands. And so the last thing you want is to use an influencer who has a fake audience, which is possible. So there are sites out there where you can buy followers, and they're essentially bots. They're not real people. They're just fake accounts floating out there that follow certain people because they are bought to do so. And you don't want that, because then your audience or your message is only going out to a select number of people who actually follow that influencer, and the message can go out to just bots who are not going to interact, obviously, with the information, are not going to act on it. And so brands have had to do a lot of research to determine how they can determine themselves what is a real influencer versus a fake influencer look like. And so we're going to speak a little bit about that right now. So avoiding fake influencers. Before we do that, let me check to see if we have any comments or questions. No, not yet. But if you have any, feel free to put them in there, and then we'll cover them after we're done with the webinar. But continuing, so avoiding fake influencers. So of course, trust is a big one. Like I said, do your research to determine if the influencer is dedicated to produce content for their fans. Majority of the time, an influencer is somebody who really values creativity, whether they're on social media, whether they have their own blog, but they're essentially creators. They're somebody who loves creativity, and through their channels is how they express that. And so you have to do the research to see if this is an influencer who produces their content in a creative way every single time that they have fun, really essentially producing that content. Or if it's an influencer that simply does it just to gain money, that is essentially a fake influencer, versus somebody who actually does it to maintain that creative side of them. So trust is definitely one. Unity, so determining if the influencer stays current with their fans. A good influencer, you will see them answering in the comment section. You'll see them not only answering the questions that their influencer or that their audience has, but you'll see them reaching out to their audience or their fans for ideas, or connecting with them across all platforms. So they don't just ignore their audience's questions or the like, but they connect with them on that more personal level. So those are really the influencers who are successful because they want to remain authentic, because they want to continue to build that relationship with their brand. And so really authenticity is such a really big, important thing for an influencer to have. It really is the bedrock of that influencer, because if they don't have authenticity, then they really don't have a whole lot to bring to their audience, and that can get really tough. They have to have that idea of being authentic. They have to commit to creating content for their audience daily, regardless of what their situation looks like. So for example, a lot of YouTubers will create 1 to 2 videos a day because that is the amount of content they notice their audience is willing to watch or participate in. And if they were to one day just say they produce 3 videos a day, say they're very they've gotten their audience used to creating 3 videos a day, and they've created that following around their 3 videos a day, and then they all of a sudden cut down to 1 video a day because they just got tired of it. They essentially are not, they're not doing it for their audience anymore. They're doing it only for themselves, and a really big part of it is them connecting with their audience, because that's what they want. They want to connect with their audience. They want to build that trust with them. And so it's really important to monitor them and see if they're dedicated to their audience, to see if they really care about their audience. And so, of course, doing that research is going to help you. You want to be sure that they are honest, not only in their videos, but in their comments. See how they interact with their comments, because the best way to look at it is an influencer is somebody who's going to be an ambassador for you. And if you're not comfortable with the way that they speak or their attitude or their persona, then that's somebody that's not right for you. And so doing that research is really going to help you. So it takes a while to determine who you want to speak on your behalf, but it's worth it in the end to have that. So next we're going to talk about bloggers. This is just a list of a few bloggers here in San Antonio that if you want to take a look at, see if this is somebody that you would want them to come out to your school and visit, to see if they want to do or work with you. San Antonio Charter Moms is one, San Antonio Moms blog, as well as Alamo City Moms blog. And then Hot in Texas. Those 4 are just a few bloggers here in San Antonio that you might want to work with. But it's also important to be aware of different influencers that may exist in your school already. You might have parents or moms in your school who already created these large followings, who have social media accounts that are blogging or whatever it may be every single day. And so just working with those parents already is a really good step or initiative to take to kind of branch into the influencer world. Also, I'm going to include tomorrow when I send out the presentation as well as the webinar in an email, I'm going to include a few different sites or programs that you can use. That way, rather than going through and going through the whole Google search of, who's a education blogger or vlogger in San Antonio, and then having to go through and seeing the research, okay, what does their audience look like? What is their engagement? What does their reach look like? There are a few sites out there that actually do it already for you that make it a little bit easier. to do your research, I will include those links into the email as well. That way you have everything that you can have everything that you need all in one place, and it's a little bit easier for you. And so just as an example, using an influencer is much more than just using a post or just having them create a post for you on social media. But if you tap into a vlogger, they might talk about your school in their video for great lengths of time. That's another way to have content produced. They might do a social media takeover. Those are where they come to your school or take over a few of your social media channels. And by them having access to your social media channels, they produce stories on Instagram or posts on Facebook with their name. That way your audience knows that they're in control of your social media accounts. And they kind of take your audience on a behind the scenes look with them through your school. So that's not only good for your social media, but it's good for theirs as well, because they will, of course, post on their social media that they're going to be participating in this social media takeover. So it drives their audience to your social media, and therefore that's where you get a great amount of engagement. So there are a lot of different ways that you can work with influencers. It's not necessarily them just posting about you one time and moving on, but there's a lot of different ways. And of course, look at influencers or working with influencers as it being a really good relationship for you to have in the long run. More often than not, if an influencer has a really good time or positive experience working with you, they are much more likely to work with you again in the future. And so if you have those relationships with these people who have these large followings, it's a really good tool to have essentially on your belt. Because if they're able to work with you and promote your school, then your audience just grows a lot bigger. And so it's definitely a new type of marketing to get used to. But once you do your own research, once you kind of read up more on it, feel free to ask us questions if we can help explain it to you a little bit more. Then it's definitely a new wave of marketing to give a try. It might seem a little bit more intimidating because you are working with somebody directly. But of course, doing all that research beforehand is really going to help you to ensure that that you're not taking advantage of, because you don't want that. You don't want to pay an influencer only for them to create a post that didn't actually go anywhere, that didn't really do anything for your brand or for your school. And so, like I said, do your research. If there's anything that we can do to help you all, if you have an influencer in mind that you'd want to partner with, but you're not entirely sure if you trust them, if you want a second opinion, you can always reach out to us and we'll do our own research aside and let you know if this is somebody that we think is good to partner with. Or we could say, no, what we've determined is that their engagement doesn't look great, their reach doesn't look great, they might have a lot of bots following them, and so it would not be a good influencer to partner with because your message won't go as far. And so any questions that you might have, feel free to send us an email. We'd love to partner with you and to work with you on that. So that is it for today. It was a pretty short presentation just because it was just me today, and this topic was a little bit shorter than our other ones. So let me pull this presentation down so you can see me a little bit. Okay, so this was our first presentation of the new year. We're really excited for this semester, this year's webinar, and we really want to do, as well as Tanya, the one who presents with me, is we really want to get our webinar in front of you guys in person more often than we did last year. So a lot of them last year, we might have only done one in person, but we want to do a lot more in person this semester. And so that is something, if that's something that you're really interested in, because it really is something that we want to do, because we feel if we're able to present to you in person, we have that interaction. You can ask those questions on the spot and we can answer them for you, or stick around after and answer them for you. But if this is something you guys are saying, yes, we love to do these more in person, please give us that feedback. You can send me an email My email was on the screen, but it's Victoria P. at San Luis Ochoa. And we'd love to do that. So we've gotten really good feedback from principals about presentation topics going into the new year. So we have a few topics already lined up, but I'm actually going through and editing that editorial calendar for what the semester is going to look like and adding in a few other topics that were presented to us by principals because this was a topic they were interested in. We hadn't talked about it before. And so I'm going to edit it and send it to you all. There's a few different topics or webinars that I would like to do in person. And so I will send that out as well. What we did last year or last semester when we had a webinar in person was we were actually at Principal Gabriel Duarte's school. And so we had him host us and have the webinar presented on a screen. And so we presented from his school. And so we would love to do that with other principals this coming semester. If you were able to just host us for 2 hours one day or 2 hours out of the month, and for us to be there and just have the presentation on the screen and invite other principals to the school, that way we can do it in person. That is something that we would really love to do because we want to meet you guys and speak with you guys in person and answer any questions that you might have. So yeah, so I will email this presentation out as well as a slideshow tomorrow morning, as well as a few of those links that I talked about to those different sites that will help you monitor the engagement and reach of each influencer. But like I said, feel free to ask any questions. I'm going to check right now and see if we have any questions posted. I don't see any, which is okay. But if you want to send us any questions by email, you can also send it to Tanya at sanluisochoa.com. She is the one who presents with me every month, and she would be more than happy as well to answer any questions. So thank you for attending. Thank you for watching. If you're watching at a later date, thank you for watching as well. And we look forward to speaking to you all next month. Bye-bye.